About 2,400 years ago, there lived in India an outspoken materialist and leader of an ascetic order who is remembered for his caustic rejection of any belief in life after death. He wrote these words: "There is no afterlife. Man is formed of the four elements. When he dies, earth returns to the earth, water to water, fire to fire, and air to air, while the senses vanish into space. Four men take up the corpse on a litter. They gossip about the dead man as far as the cremation ground, where his bones turn the color of a dove's wing and his sacrifices end in ashes. They are fools who preach almsgiving, and those who maintain the existence of immaterial categories speak vain and lying nonsense. When the body dies, both fool and wise alike are cut off and perish. They do not survive after death." Now, the remarkable thing about that statement is that scarcely any attention was paid to it at all. For if there is anything that ties together the great religious traditions of India through the classical, medieval, and modern periods, it is the unshakable belief in transmigration, a belief that birth, youth, old age, death, and rebirth succeed one another in a process that in fact extends itself to the world itself, which knows a living and dying rhythm of its own. There is in Hinduism a remarkable homogeneity regarding the existence of life and death. Death has sometimes been said to be the measure of a man. The way in which a man faces up to or understands his own mortality is a mark of his greatness. I think it may also be said of a religion as well. And Hinduism, in its own way, has brought together, converging its myths, rites, and symbols and attitudes of death to convey its understanding of the place of man in the cosmos. We need to understand something of the vocabulary of death and rebirth. Our own culture has taken on some of the terminology, if not the beliefs as well, of the Hindu worldview, whereas in generations gone by, the belief in reincarnation might have been supported by citing the Egyptian Book of the Dead or the Orphic Pythagorean mystery cults. Now there is an easy reference to such terms as karman and samsara and moksha and dharma, and these bear the stamp of an Indian import. Samsara is the belief in the cycle of existence, both cosmic and human. Another term that is of importance to us is karman, literally action. Man is the sum of his own past actions. As Gandhi put it, character is property. It is the noblest of man's possessions. In other words, a man determines by his own actions his place, and the fact of rebirth is the punishment and reward he deserves. But there is a way out of the cycle of existence, and that, of course, is the point of Hindu expressions in general. That is freedom or release, moksha being the release to the transcendent, the imperishable plane of existence. In the Vedic tradition in ancient India, there was a belief in the simple perpetuation of earth's pleasures in heaven. But soon there came to be an understanding that cosmic dissolution was something to be feared. A re-death, punar mrityu, dying again, was something to be avoided. And by the time of the Upanishadic speculations, there is a search for the Atman, the self of an individual, the self of the cosmos, and the Upanishads came to the declaration of homology between those, that the self is the transcendent absolute, the irreducible integer of life. Now we are going to explore something of the Hindu expressions of death and rebirth, this journey that every man passes from death to the life beyond. And we are going to see two phases of this. First, the cremation rite itself, the antyeshti, literally in the Sanskrit text, this is the last offering. One's body is offered up as a final sacrifice. And beyond them come the rites called Shraddha rites, the rites performed by the living for the deceased to promote him to one or another world. In Benares, the holy city, the city in which it is auspicious to die because one there obtains salvation, there are many people who come to die. There is in fact a hostel built for the dying, and here one may live out one's last days in the company of priests. But most people in Benares or elsewhere in India die in their own homes. And they are carried then from the house on a litter down to the river, and the chant Ram Nam Satyahe accompanies them by the bearers of the litter. Here we see a deceased person coming down to the river Ganges in Benares, where the corpse is immersed in the water first, in the company of a number of mourners who have come to the burning ghat. The person who is the yajamana, who is to be the sacrificer, usually the eldest son of the deceased, is shaved. And then the body is brought up from the riverside and placed upon a pyre of logs that have been purchased from the dome caste who control the burning ghat. This case is that of a man in a white shroud. This one is of a woman in a red shroud. Her husband, having been shaved, stands ready to perform the offering of cremation. The mourners sit beside the pyre until it is burned down, and the sacrificer then flips the last remaining fragment of the burned body into the river to gain salvation for the deceased. Elsewhere in India, we see in Gaya, another sacred city, a man performing the cremation of his mother. When I asked how old she was, he replied that she was between 60 and 75. He wasn't sure. Here he has brought with him a number of mourners to circumambulate the pyre 7 times while they chant and light the pyre each time round. Then, unlike the tradition of Benares, in Gaya everyone goes away and lets the pyre burn in isolation. You can see in the background the ashes of a number of other cremation fires. In the morning, the sacrificer will return and pour offerings of water and milk upon those ashes, and he will then take a few small bone fragments in a jar with the intention of someday going to Benares or somewhere else on the Ganges to dispose of them there. Elsewhere, we see in the sacred city of Puri on the east coast a crematorium that has been constructed for the burning process. And inside this building, at the left is the crematorium place, and the right is a shrine to god Rama, who is associated with the dead. Now, the rite of cremation, of course, is just the beginning of the long sequence of the rites of death. And after the decease, each day the sacrificer should come to the river or to a temple tank in order to bathe and to perform the rites of pindadana, of offerings to the deceased, to reconstruct a ritual body for him, to take him to the other world. In the case of a man named Lal Chand, who died in Benares quite suddenly one evening and left destitute his 2 young sons, aged 8 and 12, and his widow, we have an instance of the abbreviation of these rites. The family was too poor to perform the proper reconstruction of the body, so everything is done according to their capacity in the 10th day rite itself. And here, by a temple tank, we have the rite of the 10th day. Each day, however, the little boy has come to the temple tank, has bathed, and taken some of the water in which he has bathed and put it in a pot hanging on a peepal tree. the pipal being long associated in India with the dead and departed. And he also hangs a little lamp of ghee, of butter, to light the way of the preta from the tree down to this nourishing water. Now on the 10th day after death, the boy comes together with other members of the family and a priest that they have hired for a small amount of money to perform the rite of passage from the condition of being a preta, a ghost, into that of becoming one of the ancestors. There is an understanding in Hinduism that the sthula sharira, the gross body, is cremated, and at that point there is released the subtle body of an individual, the suksma sharira, out through the opening at the top of the head called the brahmarandra. And at that point then the individual is released to become a preta. We see now the rite in which this boy promotes his father to become a pitra, an ancestor among his own pitraha, his own ancestors. He pours out the water and milk upon a rice ball in the company of a mahapatra, a priest hired especially for this occasion. Here they are together, pouring water and milk over the boy's right hand onto a pinda, a ball of rice that represents the deceased. After this, then the male members of the family will have their heads shaved, and in the distance we can see the women of the family who have no part of the rites but who have come quietly to the temple tank to bathe and now proceed home, the widow in the pink sari leading the procession. The pots on the tree, which are no longer of necessity, are taken down by the mahapatra and smashed on the ground, the deceased now being in the company of his ancestors. Sometimes there is the marking of the burial place of bone fragments by the river under a tree, and here is such a marker, noting the fact of the passage to heaven of this deceased person. This is unusual, however, and is seldom seen in India. Now we have a look at the rites of the poor, those who can afford only the simplest rites of India, and these are, of course, the majority. But we want to look now at the rites as they once were done in ancient India, according to the Sanskrit texts, and as they are now performed only by the wealthy orthoprax, by those who have the time, the inclination, and the wealth to perform them. And we will look now to the death of a famous benefactor and institution builder in Benares who was cremated with great ceremony on the Ganges. And his eldest son now comes at dawn each morning to bathe in the river and to perform the offerings that reconstruct his father's ritual body. The first day, his offering reconstructs the head of his father. The second day, the shoulders, the arms and torso, and so on, until now he has come to the 9th day of such rites, when he reconstructs the genitals of his father. And we will see that he is now facing his priests. The Mahapatra on his left is quietly observing, doing nothing in the rite, but he represents the deceased and is careful to note the proceedings in their entirety. The sacrificer fills the pots, as we saw the little boy do, and then returns on the 10th day in order to finish this ritual reconstruction. Now there are 10 little cups of water. First he makes an altar. He places out the ball of rice, the pinda, which represents his father. He fills the water cups that will now be offered to the father, and he proceeds to worship the pinda in the standard forms of puja with incense and flowers and sandalwood paste and sesame, waving a lamp before it. And he then makes the ritual payment to the priests who have performed the rite for him. He takes up the pinda and breathes upon it, then places it in a pot, and the pot is taken out and thrown into the river Ganges. The sacrificer now refills the water pots on the tree for the last time, and they too are taken down and smashed, the 10th day rite having been concluded. And the male members of the family are shaved by the family barbers. The women come quietly down to bathe in the river. Now, on the 11th day after death, there are a number of rites that go on all day long in order to promote the deceased to different levels of the heavens. One of these is the Narayana Bali, and this is a rite that is seldom performed nowadays, but which is intended to promote the deceased to the heaven of Visnu, Vaikuntha. Succeeding that rite, which is a powerful evocation with all of the proper mantras recited by 7 priests and fire offerings going on at the same time, is a 16-fold rite, recalling the ancient Soma traditions, in which man was declared to be 16-fold and the rites were always in parts of 16. Here he establishes his father in 16-fold space, along with a number of deities. He lays out rice balls upon each altar of the 16, has food and chandana paste and a lamp and water and clothing, all to worship the 16 in succession. He is careful to change his ritual thread each time he comes to the ball that represents the deceased. Then he has the task of paying the Mahapatra, who you will recall has done nothing in the rite but be present as the deceased. And now all of these gifts are being given to him, a new bed and quilts and clothing, pots and pans, jewelry and a watch, enough food to last him for a year. But he is not content. He is cantankerous and argumentative. He cajoles and asks for more, asks for gold and cash, says that the food will not last a year. His formal ritual task, you see, is to represent the needs of the dead for the coming year, to make demands upon the living, for his sustenance depends upon them. Following this, everything is cleared away, and the Mahapatra and 10 of his family, coming as they do as deities present on the ground, are feasted by the Yajamana, by the sacrificer. The sacrificer is careful to see that they are treated as guests, and he gives them money as well as food. Then everything is cleared away again, and the 16-fold rite of time is now accomplished, accomplishing in a matter of 2 hours what ordinarily would have taken an entire year to do. All of the monthly rites, the intercalary months, the special rites, and 360 daily offerings of barley pindas are offered all at one time in a basket, so that he has accomplished the next year's activities upon this day, the 11th day. That ends the day, and the next day is given over to rites in the home of the sacrificer. This is the rite of Sapindi Karana, the rite of ritually blending the pinda, the rice ball of the deceased, into those of the ancestors. You see in his hand the rice ball representing the deceased, which he places down upon an altar for the deceased father. Ranged out beside are the altars for the deceased's father, his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, with 3 round rice balls waiting to be offered to each of them. In the background is another altar for the paternal ancestors beyond the great-grandfather, and they are here too, represented by the Vishvadevaha, all of the gods. He now places the 3 pindas in this rite of Sapindi Karana, in which the ancestors have come from each of the 3 lokas, out in front of him, ranged in a row, the 3 balls progressing away from his right knee. All of the time, there is the chanting of the priests in a number of mantras, all 7 of them uniting with this. We can see on this chart the way in which the promotion is accomplished by this rite. The son is the deceased, and he will join now the company of his father, who comes from the earth plane and represents the gods who are called Vasus, his grandfather, who lives in the midspace and represents the gods called Rudras, his great-grandfather, who comes from heaven and represents the Adityas. When the son now becomes a father, he will then promote the great-grandfather into the realm of the transcendent, where the remote ancestors are the Vishvadevaha. The priests reciting the mantras now conclude this rite as the sacrificer cuts the Pretapinda into 3 pieces and blends each of the 3 into the 3 balls of his paternal ancestors. Then all of those 3, now having incorporated very dramatically the deceased in their midst, are worshipped by the sacrificer. At this point, he is free from the ritual defilement period, and he is free now to accomplish his ordinary routine. He makes his first fire offering, chants his first mantras, and goes back into his ordinary ritual life. He also makes a dramatic gift of a cow and her calf to a priest representing the deceased. This is the rite of Godana, of the gift of a cow, which takes the place of the ancient sacrifice of a cow. And this is tied to the myth in which a man must cross a dangerous river, the river Vaitarani, by holding on to the tail of a cow. This is enacted in the rite as it is presented in behalf of the deceased father. Another evocative rite, in which another priest is the ritual surrogate of the dead, is this gift of food and many possessions to a priest sitting upon a bed, who then lies down under a quilt as though he were asleep, representing the sleep of death. The family, including the women, come out to circumambulate and chant around him, go forward and lift up the bed and shake him awake. He sits up in his reawakening from the dead in the other world and gives his blessing then to each of the members of the family. The last rite of this long sequence of 13 days is an assembly of great and learned pundits from the city of Benares, 200 of them who have gathered in the home of the sacrificer in order to celebrate a Pandit Sava, a recitation in fluent Sanskrit and a debate about the meaning of life and death. After this, the sacrificer worships the feet and makes a presentation of sweets and money to each of the 200 pundits, and his rite is concluded. Now, there is in India a tradition of recognizing the deceased at one special time of the year, although many offerings are done at other times. This is in September and October, and it is the rite during the Pitrapaksha, the 15 days of the dark half of the moon in the fall. This is a time especially when one remembers one's deceased parents and goes in particular to ancient cities such as Benares or Gaya or Hardwar. And here in Benares, a number of people have come to perform these rites for their deceased ancestors. An old man can be sitting in the river in this fashion with his ritual paraphernalia behind him, bringing his own manual because he is his own priest. And he takes up a copper pot such as this, having first placed a kusha grass ring upon his finger to purify his offering hand, and then he continuously makes offerings of water over the tail of this copper pot. Others have come to Benares to have priests perform such rites for them. These men from villages outside the city have hired a man to offer the rice and the water for the nourishment of their ancestors. It is particularly auspicious to go to the sacred city of Gaya, where one may make offerings at any of 54 stations ranged about the city, here on the dried riverbed of the river Palgu, or in the surrounding temples and shrines thousands and thousands of people come at this time of the year to make offerings of rice and barley and water. Here the women are included in the rites. They come to the riverbanks. They climb mountain tops to seek out these stations, and they sit under famous and sacred trees and leave commemorating threads tied to the trees as they go. But there's another phenomenon that we should recall, and that is the phenomenon of the Bhuta, or ghost, who comes to be if the rites are truncated or not accomplished properly or eliminated. And we have an example here of two men who have come from a village to the temple of Kali in Vindhyachal to be exorcised of such a Bhuta that has possessed them. And the shaman or Oja is by magical means trying to eliminate this Bhuta or ghost who has lingered about their village. Now we have tried to illustrate by means of these photographs not only the complexity of these rites and symbols of death, but also the tremendous power that is generated within them. And here again we have a continuity of Hinduism with the Vedic tradition, a sense in which the rite always has results, always produces actions. And here there is the sense of the evocation of responsibility on the part of the living for the deceased. There is also, as we noted, the understanding that one performs rites according to one's capacity. The boy who was performing for 5 rupees, the simple rite for his father, should know that it was just as efficacious to perform it that way as the wealthy man using 5,000 rupees and 13 days of rites to promote his father to the company of his ancestors. At the same time, we have seen that India has a way of condensing and abbreviating, even eliminating some of these rites under the pressure of the modern times. This is true, and some of the things that we have seen here probably will not be done in another generation. But what will remain is the profound grasp of the continuity of human and cosmic life, that on this mysterious, strange plane of existence, there is not annihilation after death, but a continuation.